Welcome to Connections. I'm Stacey Levene-Lavely. Thanks so much for joining us today. I am so excited to have a new friend back. We met her a little while ago. Her name is Emily Rubin, and she is the assistant professor in psychiatry at UMass Medical School and the director of sibling support at the Eunice Kennedy Shriver Center. And not only that, as you may have seen, she is also the executive director and co-founder of Massachusetts Sibling Support Network. So today I am welcoming her on the show, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about the program up at UMass and what is the impact on growing up with a brother or sister with behavioral or mental health issues. And she's going to go over some of that with us, and we're going to take a deep dive into that. So without further ado, welcome Miss Emily Rubin. Thank you for coming back on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So can you tell us a little bit about what the impact is of growing up with a brother or sister who has either a behavioral issue or mental health issues?
Sure. So, well, let me start by saying that there's a program at UMass Medical School that I developed called the Sibling Support Program, a family-centered mental health initiative. And that program is underway at several inpatient psych units across the state. And it's from that experience that I really gathered a lot of information about the impact of mental illness or the impact of behavioral issues on typically developing siblings. So I just wanted to kind of create a context. So what I've seen among the siblings that have participated in that program is that many of them are struggling with issues around secrecy and shame. Some of them have been subjected to physical or verbal aggression. Most of them are very confused because they have grown up with a brother or sister where the parents have had to have a different set of expectations, and many of them have a different set of disciplinary actions because it's very difficult to parent a child with mental health issues in the exact same way that you parent a child that's typically developing. So that experience in and of itself is very confusing for the sibling. The sibling might say, hey, my brother just, threw his dinner on the floor and broke a chair, and I'm the one that has to clear the table. Like, where's the justice in that situation? So there's a lot of focus on what's fair and what's not fair in these families. And that's a very thorny subject. It's a really tough one for parents because the siblings don't understand how difficult it is for parents to be raising a child with behavioral challenges. And the parents are just trying to keep everybody safe. They're trying to keep the peace in the house. And they're trying, most importantly, to de-escalate dangerous situations. But from the siblings' perspective, again, like using that example I just said of the child breaking a chair, the sibling might see that he's not getting punished. And if the sibling had done a behavior like that, then she would be facing a whole host of disciplinary problems, losing privileges, losing a cell phone, having a curfew or whatever it is. So that's a really tough dynamic. And that's one that we approach all the time in this program at UMass Medical School.
Yeah, that is really hard, and they can't understand that because it's the double-edged sword kind of thing, that if he does this, why doesn't this happen? And you find that so much, and you find that just in typical neurotypical situations anyway, and then you're compounding it with a mental health issue or a behavioral issue. And I hear what you're saying on that. It's so tough. So what kind of an impact in general, like I guess, where do they go from there? Like, how do they, the impact, is, like you said, dealing with fairness and all that kind of stuff. How does a parent, or how do programs, like, for lack of a better word, I guess, level the playing field?
Well, we really focus on providing education to family members. In the program that I described, we actually work with every member of the family, not just the sibling. So we have parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, anybody who's very closely involved with a family unit, we want to work with. So we have a group for parents and caregivers to learn about how to build resiliency in the sibling and how to try to decrease some of the trauma that they've been exposed to. At the same time, we try to boost the confidence of the parents and boost their competence as parents, because by the time a child has been admitted to an inpatient psychiatry unit, many parents feel very critical of themselves. They feel like they're bad parents. They don't understand how things got so out of control. So our job is to really boost them so that they can be the wonderful parents that they are. So we also have, in that program, we have, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I can just continue in this vein of describing the program.
No, I think it's really good, because it's hard, and there are just so many different angles you can look at it from, that it's really important, I think, to see it from each of the angles. So I think you're doing a great job. Because, like you said, from a parent perspective, it's one thing. From, like, aunts and uncles, like people who are outside of the family, they're looking at a whole different lens. And then, when you're dealing with the other siblings and things like that, then you're getting down into, like, the nitty gritty, and, like, why does he get to do this and why does she get to do that? She threw, a plate of peas at mom, but she gets to go to the carnival tonight, or whatever. So it's just really hard understanding that, and then actually connecting and cohesively connecting all those pieces together, so that you have, like, a new family puzzle dynamic that they're able to all kind of interconnect with each other, while the person who's having the issues is at the center of that. And what do each of those webs look like as you're kind of creating that whole new frame or dynamic or whatever you want to call it, is really important. So no, I think you did a great job talking about the different pieces.
Well, thank you. One of the parts of this program, so we have a part for parents and caregivers. We also have sibling support groups in which the siblings have a safe place to share what's going on with them, and a safe place to process their trauma and to learn coping strategies, and to feel like they're not alone. Many siblings of kids with behavioral issues, because it's the behavioral or mental health piece is invisible, that other people don't see that what the sibling has been subjected to, it can create a very complicated dynamic for the sibling. So being able to put words to their emotions is especially important. And one thing I'm very proud of is that this program also serves, in addition to serving families, it also serves as a training rotation for psychiatry residents and social work interns and psychology trainees. So they get trained in family-centered mental health care, and they have this opportunity to work directly with the siblings, which is, for most of them, the only time in their entire training that they've had access to a typically developing child that they get to work with. And in turn, that's helping to build capacity among providers that practice family-centered mental health care. Many parents will feel much more comfortable talking to a parent mentor than to a doctor. And so while we have the trainees run the sibling support groups, we have trained parent mentors who work directly with the parents and caregivers and any adult in the home. because what we found is that a parent mentor is somebody with lived experience who has also raised kids with mental health issues, and they have real credibility among families who, but for many parents, as I mentioned, by the time their child has been hospitalized or sometimes had repeat hospitalizations, they can feel so critical of themselves, and then they can feel sometimes there's judgment that they perceive coming from clinicians. And so having that parent mentor there has made a world of difference for these families.
That's amazing because, when you do have a shared experience like that, especially when you're dealing with mental health issues, with behavioral issues and things like that, people don't understand that it's not necessarily the way the child was raised that changes the dynamic there. Oftentimes, it's just how the child is or the person is, that this is just whatever is triggering this can be so much. It can be chemical, it can be, experiences and what have you. There's just so many different layers of it. And I see what you're saying, because I know too, often, like, when you're going to any kind of doctor or what have you, a lot of people do have that, oh my God, they're judging me. I have diabetes. I ate, a sundae. I feel so guilty. There's like guilt wrapped in it too. And I think that's a big piece that people often don't think about with the parent. It's just like they feel guilty. They feel bad that their kids are behaving the way they are. And, and I don't care if your kid is 7 or if he's 25 or 35, it doesn't matter. It's, you always have that kind of, they're a part of you and you feel very, very connected. And I think with another a mentor of any kind or peer mentor or what have you, you have that more that they've been here, they've done this, they know what I'm dealing with. They know it's not like, oh, poor me, oh, I need attention and blah, blah, blah. And, so many people, and especially when you get into like the family dynamic, if somebody does have a child with a special need or a behavior or what have you, a lot of the other families like, oh, she's always complaining about that and like, how bad can it really be? She just needs to discipline them and tell them no once in a while and everything will be fine. And that's what the problem is. And, it's not like that. There are things that do trigger and create other situations. And it isn't because the parent's a bad parent. They didn't discipline properly, because then they might have 3 other kids who are, typical, very neurotypical, very, able to handle situations. And then you have that one who just can't. And that doesn't mean that the parent is a bad parent. And I think those mentors, like the programs you provide, are just so critical because it's a safe space. And I think that's like just in general, in people in general, you always want that soft space that you can land on, that you can just say, this is what's going on. I can't tell anybody else's without like feeling like either a failure, that I'm being judged, whatever the situation is. And the fact you guys provide that is so, so important. And I love, I have learned so much from you today already. And I love the fact you have that, because I agree with you 100% that it really is a place where they can let go. And that's where the healing's going to start, because that's how they get strong. That's how they build their foundation. And then they're able to connect out to the other parts. They're going to create a full circle to really support the person with the behavioral and mental health issue. And everybody's on the same page. Everyone realizes that, oh, I never thought of it that way. Like, I didn't look at it from that angle. Like, mom looks at it this way. That's not how I saw it. I saw it a different way. So I just love the program. I love the idea of it. So tell me a little bit about the program that you like. How do you my question is at the end, like after you've already kind of, gotten all the little pieces together, how do you actually form that bubble around the person or whatever you want to call it that really can support them? Like, how are all those pieces interconnected so that they are a safety net, that when things do go south, and they will, because it's life. We've learned a lot of that, I feel, in the COVID crisis and what have you, that things happen and there's nothing anybody can do about it. There's no oh, well, we'll let you go to the concert, but nobody else can. That's just not going to happen. Or if people are isolated from their friends, or, other family members who aren't in the house? Like, how do you just really connect everything together, like all these great pieces you're doing, like with the mentors and the this and the that? How do you bring it together and, make it really a cohesive unit?
Well, so the Sibling Mentor Program is an initiative of the Massachusetts Sibling Support Network. So that's actually not an initiative of UMass Medical School, but there is overlap there. In terms of how do we kind of hold the family together is sort of what I'm hearing you saying.
With them, the clinicians, like, how do you make everybody kind of like, I guess, find their place kind of in that circle, like where they come in, where their strengths are able to be used to help support each other? Because where you have like the clinicians coming in, like following the families and, seeing the dynamics and all that kind of stuff, like how does it all at the end, like just get kind of, brought together with all the little pieces to really kind of make something that, is going to be supportive to both the siblings who have, people with mental health or behavioral issues, as well as possibly the person who is experiencing those issues as well?
So, well, if I guess I can answer that in a couple of different ways. One is that families are always welcome to return to this program. And what we've found is, so we have, as I mentioned, a group for parents and caregivers and other adults. And that's mostly a psychoeducational group in which they're learning about the impact of mental illness on siblings and learning specific strategies to try to make the siblings more resilient. For parents that want to return to the program, they get a chance to meet with me. And I'm a social worker. And so I can work with them in a more in-depth way and talk very specifically about their family dynamics. And so I tend to have small group settings. It may be, 3 or 4 parents from 3 or 4 families will gather on Zoom and will identify some common themes and talk about strategies to deal with them. There are 4 groups that run simultaneously every time we offer this program, because we've got the parent group with the parent mentor, the parent group with me for returning families. We've got a teen sibling group, and we have a young sibling group. So it is a lot of moving parts. And usually we have the clinicians from one or both of the sibling groups pop into the Zoom session with the parents and report on what's going on in the sibling group. Because usually what happens historically, what has happened in sibling support groups is that the parent drops off the sibling and picks them up an hour later and has no idea what transpired. So we really want to have very open communication and open learning in this program. We encourage family members to talk to each other after the session, to talk about what they learned, what was the favorite part of the activity that they did. In the sibling support group, it's very activity-based, and we always tell the parents what activity the siblings are doing so that they can follow up with them. So, for example, the main activity that we do in the sibling support group is called the Starburst activity. And we call it that because when we met in person before the pandemic, we had Starburst candy that we got to share, but we can't do that over Zoom. So now it's just called the Starburst activity. In that activity, the siblings basically will respond to a series of questions that are linked to the color-coded, like, virtual candy that we're not really using. And some of these questions are, what do you tell other people about your brother or sister? Or why is your brother or sister in the hospital? Or what makes you mad about your brother or sister? What makes you happy about your brother or sister? What do you do to feel better when you're upset about your brother or sister? And these questions elicit a lot of great information, and the siblings hear from one another that there's a lot of commonality in what they're going through. Many of these siblings have been really hurt by some of the behaviors of the brother or sister, some of the behaviors of well-meaning people in the community who have said insensitive things to them. For example, that the line that is often said to parents, which is very hurtful, is, well, have you tried setting limits? I mean, I've heard that so many times. And so in order for what people can do outside of the family unit, if they want to support that family that's going through this mental health crisis, is not to make statements like that, and instead say things like, I'm here to listen. What can I do for you? You know, one of the lines in the disability community is that mental illness is not a casserole illness, meaning that if you have an individual who's been admitted for inpatient psychiatric treatment, you're not going to be getting a lot of casseroles delivered. You know, if that person had, you know, God forbid, cancer or was in the hospital for some other reason, you'd be getting, you know, food deliveries. So, so, you know, a lot of what we do is try to raise awareness within the family and outside of the family. After every session, I do a debrief with the trainees and clinicians that run the sibling group. And we talk about the issues that come up and how the best way to support the siblings. So this is, I like to think of this program as sort of a wraparound program for the entire family.
I love that. That's awesome. Now, how do families, I mean, you know, obviously this is amazing and so many families need it. I mean, what you've been talking about is just eye-opening in a lot of ways. And like you said, it's hard. Like you don't, I love the casserole theory. I was going, where is she going with this? But it's true because A, either the people don't want to talk about it, or B, they don't really know how to approach the family. And there are just a lot of different, you know, avenues. But for your program, getting back to that, now, how would a family qualify for a program like this? Like, how would you know which families you potentially could help versus, you know, something that's just, you know, maybe not going to fit this, you know, particular dynamic?
Sure. So at Cambridge Health Alliance, where this program is underway as a research study, our parent mentor calls every family of a child that's been admitted to the inpatient psych unit. So she's called probably 5,000 families in Massachusetts over the years.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And so it's a very labor-intensive recruitment strategy. But what we find is that when the parent mentor reaches out over the phone and says, hey, I've been in your shoes, I know how hard this is, that we do an eligibility screening over the phone to see if families are eligible at participating hospitals like Cambridge Health Alliance. During the pandemic, we were very lucky to get funding. I want to give a big shout out to the Worcester Community Foundation, the Greater Worcester Community Foundation, and the FAR Fund, and the Weil Foundation, and the Bear Foundation. All of these foundations have come together to help support families of youth with mental health needs during COVID, because there's been such an increased rate of mental health crisis during this pandemic. And so I've partnered just this past year, we're now offering for a statewide program on Zoom, free of charge. That's a partnership between UMass Medical School Psychiatry Department and PAL, the Parent Professional Advocacy League, and MCPAP, the Massachusetts Child Psychiatry Access Program.
Oh, wow.
So these three groups, these three partners have come together so that we can provide this sibling support program for all family members on Zoom. And if people want information about that, they can reach out to me. They can also reach out to PAL, the Parent Professional Advocacy League. Those are probably the best places to get information. So this program that's on Zoom, it is we do give priority to families in the Worcester area. because of our funding, but what we always have space. I mean, we try to always have space. I shouldn't say we always have space, but we will give open spaces to families that fall beyond that greater Worcester area.
Oh, that's awesome. That's amazing. Now, so there's no cost to the families. Everything is
no cost to the families. This is a fully grant funded program. And I'm very, very grateful that the 4 foundations that I mentioned really recognize the importance of this program and this work in supporting siblings and strengthening families.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Emily, you just like brought it all home. It's all about families, and especially during, things like the pandemic and things like that. It's so important to just really throw our arms around people that we love and just really be there for them, support them in any way we can. And my takeaway from this especially is just that, what can I do? How can I help you? And, I think that's the most important thing that other people, when they're looking at these families, this is what you need to do. If you're seeing a family who's struggling with this, and heck, if you want to throw in a casserole, I'm sure they wouldn't mind that either. But really be there, support them, help them, try not to judge. I mean, it's so hard to understand what it's like to be in these people's shoes. And with that, I'm going to say thank you to the lovely Miss Emily Rubin. I hope you will come back and talk with us about more of your initiatives as things go along. You have been such a pleasure to listen to. I know it's a really tough topic, and it's really emotionally charged, and it's really hard on the families, and the work you guys are doing is very emotional. And I just thank you from the bottom of my heart that you're there for these families. And, you may not realize it, but you're changing lives. So thank you so much again for being on Connections and visiting with me this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thanks, everybody. Let's keep unity in the community. Have a great day. Bye-bye.